Steel City. Is everybody ready to go? Let's proclaim the greatest radio show.
Welcome, fans, to another edition of Fantasy Football on the Spread. I'm your host, Jim Sella, in studio with co-hosts J-Dash and JK47. I had a great fantasy week, scored over 200 points in both my leagues, won both my games. I'm in first place for the first time in fantasy football. My deep sleepers are even hitting. I'm predicting the outcomes of Steeler games right. I'm just on fire right now.
Always talking yourself up, man. Never mention when you're wrong, right?
Well, you mention when I'm wrong every time, so if I don't mention when I'm right, nobody will.
Well, I don't mention when I'm right. 47 doesn't mention when he's right. Conceded. But let's start off with the waiver claims. We're going to go quarterback here. Derek Carr, he's available in 75% of the leagues. And if you look over the past 2 weeks, man,
he's garbage.
He's had 665 yards, 5 touchdowns, and no picks. So he dominated. Granted, it was versus Baltimore, who has a very bad pass defense, and at Cleveland, who is middling at best, I would say. But look, he has a good running back out there in Latavius Murray. He has a definite number one option out there in Amari Cooper. He looks very good so far. And a good second option in Michael Crabtree. And maybe not long term. Who knows? Maybe Derek Carr falls off a little bit as the season goes along. But this week he goes into Chicago, who has one of the worst defenses in the game. So he should have another good week this week, even if he does fall off later in the season. But right now, he looks like one of the better quarterbacks in football. I know we don't like him around here, but he looks pretty good right now.
Chicago fans got to be pissed. They love good defense, and now their defense is garbage.
And they're getting rid of defensive players.
Yeah. Hey, let's get rid of our best defensive player.
Another quarterback here, Tyrod Taylor. He's available in about half the leagues.
Beast fantasy quarterback, not a great real-life quarterback.
Well, I mean, they're playing winning football right now. They went out and dominated Miami last week. And if you look here, he had a solid week one, nothing too great, but over the past 2 weeks, he's thrown for 519 yards, 6 touchdowns, and he also ran for a touchdown as well. And out of 2 of the 3 weeks this season, he has 40 or more rushing yards as well.
Is he better than Mike Vick?
We'll have to see. I mean, I haven't seen anything from Tyrod Taylor yet outside of these 2 games, really. So we'll have to see. But you look, his next 4 games, he has 3 good matchups. He has the New York Giants, the Tennessee Titans, and the Jacksonville Jaguars. Those are all defenses that can be beat, so Tyrod Taylor might be able to keep this going here.
I'd trade Vick for Taylor.
Well, how old is Taylor? I probably would, too.
He's in his 5th year, maybe? 6th year?
Yeah.
At the most.
Let's move on to running backs here. How about Lance Dunbar? He's still available in about 3/4 of the leagues. Look, he's
most
put up
receptions for a running back this year.
Yeah, I mean, he's playing pretty much at receiver, and now with Brandon Weeden in, he's pretty much checking down to Lance Dunbar and Jason Witten at this point. Because he really can't go deep. He's not a deep ball guy. But Dunbar's put up excellent fantasy numbers so far in at least 2 of the 3 weeks, with a mediocre performance in week 2 at Philly. I think he put up 8 or 9 points or something like that. But outside of that, he had 2 big weeks. And he's going to stay involved at least until Dez Bryant returns. And really, when Dez Bryant was healthy, he was still involved in that offense. I mean, it would be nice to have Tony Romo in at quarterback. But Weeden, like I said, he's checking down to these guys. So Lance Dunbar, I'd go pick him up and at least stash him on my bench. But I like him as a flex, too.
I like Weeden. I think he can go downfield a little more than you think he can. I just don't think he has the guys that can do it. So then that's really
Terrence
why
Williams,
Dunbar.
That's who he is. That's
yeah, but he's the number one guy now, so he's getting double covered. They take him out of the game plan. Dunbar's the only guy left with skills in the passing game. I'm not saying Witten. I'm just talking about wide receivers and running backs here.
How about Antonio Andrews from the Tennessee Titans? I came into the season talking about this guy a little bit. Now, he was somewhat buried on the depth chart. I think he was 3rd for the Tennessee Titans behind Bishop Sankey and
Cobb.
And Cobb, yeah, and Cobb got hurt, actually. But Andrews has overtaken Sankey at this point, it looks like. Last week, he had 12 carries for 49 yards and a touchdown against Indianapolis, and he was the lead back in that game. They have a bye here in week 4, but coming out of the bye, I see Antonio Andrews as the starting running back there, but he's not a guy that can explode for a 50-yard run or anything like that. He's just a hard runner. He falls forward. He's more of a guy that you have to give him some carries to make him valuable, and he's not going to be scoring every single week either.
Wasn't Sankey the first running back drafted last year? I think he was.
He might have been. I know he was drafted high in fantasy, too. Boss.
Garbage, yeah.
How about Carlos Williams from the Buffalo Bills? Now, there's word that McCoy could sit this week just to get him back to full health.
Scaring me.
But listen, even if he doesn't, Carlos Williams has scored in all 3 games this season. If you look,
touchdown vulture, that's what he is.
If you look last week, McCoy did play, but he didn't play at 100%, and he didn't play every down. I mean, Williams got a lot of play in this game. He actually had 12 carries for 110 yards and a touchdown at Miami. Now, they got the New York Giants this week. They led up the 5th most points to fantasy running backs so far, so he could have a good week this week. Now, once McCoy gets back 100%, I see Williams falling off a little bit later in the season.
He better get back to 100.
Couple receivers here. Rashard Matthews. He's available in still most of the leagues in fantasy. Now, he's not available in our leagues because you went and picked him up in one.
Believe it.
I think someone else went and picked him up in the other one. But he's had 3 straight double-digit fantasy performances, 2 straight 100-yard games. Last week, he had 6 catches on 10 targets, 113 yards and 2 touchdowns versus a good Buffalo defense. Now, they were playing from behind in that game, and they had to pass. But this is Tannehill's second option in this offense, and Rashard Matthews is a must-add at this point. Another receiver, Brashard Perryman from Baltimore. This guy hasn't played yet. He's a rookie wide receiver. We're going to have to see how he does, but I'd go pick him up if you're looking for a wide receiver because Baltimore really needs help on the offensive side and the defensive side, really. But outside of Steve Smith, really, they don't have much going on out there in the passing game, and Brashard Perryman should be involved as soon as he comes back healthy. One last guy here.
Garbage.
A tight end, Eric Ebron. He's still available in about 50% of the leagues. He has 3 straight double-digit fantasy performances in PPR. Kelvin Johnson, obviously, the number 1 target out there for Matt Stafford in Detroit. But Eric Ebron looks like he's going to be valuable in fantasy all year long. This guy is involved in this offense. You look, he's been targeted 20 times through 3 games so far. He has 13 catches, 157 yards, and 2 touchdowns. So if he's available, I'd go pick him up because it's hard to find good tight ends, and he looks like he's going to be a good tight end.
He's on my team, so he's definitely a good tight end.
He's on my team, too. All right, let's move into situational starters here. Let's start with yours again, Jim.
I'm going to go with Danny Woodhead at home against the Cleveland Browns. They might not be stopping the run so well this season so far, but they were good against the run last year, and it's too small of a sample size to say they're not good against the run right now. Woodhead isn't your typical running back. He could swing outside. He can get some sweeps. He catches balls. That's pretty much his main role as far as a running back goes. But he's also been their goal line back. And they take Melvin Gordon out of the game when they get inside the 20, inside the 10. I don't really know why. But I like Danny Woodhead in this spot. And he's on my fantasy team, so it'd be sweet to watch him put up points.
I think as the season goes along, you'll see Melvin Gordon more in those situations you're talking about. But, yeah, Danny Woodhead, he's splitting time with Melvin Gordon. He's the one used in the passing game. He's had 2 excellent fantasy weeks so far against Detroit and at Cincinnati. Yeah, he was a letdown last week at Minnesota, but Gordon was shut down as well. Minnesota shut down the running game. You look, Danny Woodhead, 90 rushing yards already, 2 rushing touchdowns. He's already at 16 targets, 12 receptions, 119 yards receiving. This is a guy I always liked. Even coming into the season, no one was giving him recognition. Danny Woodhead's the man, and he is a good play most weeks. How about you, 47?
I'm going with Derek Carr against the Chicago Bears.
Please believe we just talked about him.
As you know, Chicago has allowed the 7th most fantasy points to quarterbacks this season.
I didn't know that. Thank you for letting me know.
But the offense has been hot, and I like the 665 5-touchdown line over the past 2 games.
Yeah, it's beast mode.
So, I mean, Murray's going to keep defenses off balance, and the wide receivers look great. So, why not take them in this game?
Yeah, Chicago's terrible. I mean, they rank right up there with Baltimore in terms of letting up passing yards. So, yeah, Derek Carr, he's been one of the best quarterbacks in football so far. I definitely like it. He's sitting in situational starters right now, but if he does this for the next 2 or 3 weeks, it's time to start thinking about this guy as one of the top 12 quarterbacks in fantasy, at least.
Nah.
I'm going to go with Percy Harvin for the Buffalo Bills against the New York Giants. Look, no one was talking about this guy coming into the season either, and he might even be a sleeper at this point still. I'm going to say he's a situational starter. He has 18 targets through 3 games. He has 2 double-digit fantasy performances through 3 weeks so far. Last week, he had 8 targets, 7 receptions for 66 yards, and the Giants are not very good against the pass. They let up the 9th most fantasy points to wide receivers. I mean, we don't like the Giants' defense that much around here. to begin with. They're not that great of a defense. I mean, they're middling at best, maybe. But even Watkins, he could miss this week as well. So if Sammy Watkins misses, Percy Harvin might be the main option out there for Tyrod Taylor. But even if Watkins does play in this game, he's not going to be 100% healthy. And like I said, Percy Harvin's been putting up points with Watkins on the other side anyways.
I just read earlier that Watkins is no better than a 50-50 chance to play right now. The calf strain's a little more severe than they're saying. He's a big play guy. He's an explosive guy. If his calf isn't under him, he's not going to be able to do that. So he's not worth playing and risking further injury. So Harvin definitely could end up being that number one guy this week.
Let's not forget, we just mentioned LaShawn McCoy might sit too, so it might be Carlos Williams.
Harvin out of the backfield too. He's been a running back before.
You can put Harvin in the backfield, give him 2 or 3 carries as well. Now, he's not the same type of player he used to be necessarily. This guy used to be explosive as all hell. But now, I mean, he's not quite the same player. You're not going to put him at kick returner or punt returner. You're going to get this guy killed. But even this line in this game, I think Buffalo's -5.5. I really like the Giants in this game because Buffalo is hurting right now. I know they went out and blew out Miami in Miami last week, but I just got a bad feeling about Buffalo this week. All right, let's move on to sleepers here. Jim, who you going with? Mike Vick?
Never. I'm going to go with Eric Ebron, one of your waiver claims from earlier. Again, Ebron, yes, is on my fantasy team, so you can all hate on me. But he's in a Lions offense that should be explosive. I don't know why it hasn't got to be explosive yet. They struggled a lot last year. Yeah, Stafford just, he seemed inconsistent. He's got happy feet, not running, but he gets rid of the ball a little too soon. He's not setting his feet back there. But Ebron's a beast tight end. He's in his second year in the offense now. Calvin Johnson isn't getting as many looks as he used to. Is Golden Tate banged up too, I think? I don't know if he's going to miss the game.
Playing.
But he's banged up, so he's not at 100%.
He's not the same receiver we seen last year either.
Right.
Kelvin Johnson, and it's a little bit different with him. But Eric Ebron looks like the number 2 target out there to me.
The O-line for Detroit is garbage right now, so if Stafford's getting a lot of quick pressure, he's going to have to dump it off to the tight end early because he's not mobile. He moves, but he's not mobile.
Yeah, like I said before, 3 straight double-digit fantasy performances. Now they go into Seattle, the Legion of Boom, whatever that is. But actually, they let up the 9th most fantasy points to tight end so far this season, at least. I see Ebron. I mean, I think this guy's going to be a pretty consistent receiver for them out there. Just the way I think Detroit's going to be playing from behind a lot this season, and Ebron's going to be involved all year. 47, you're the one going, Mike Vick.
Much the consternation of my colleague over there.
Vic's garbage.
I think Vic's going to be okay. He's going to be able to check down to Le'Veon Bell. He's going to be able to check down to Heath Miller, and somehow he'll... What?
He said you think he's going to be okay. I asked if he had a thin candy show. Surprised you didn't know that.
Yeah. Hopefully he don't.
I mean...
either which way. I mean, like I say, he got some good check down options, especially Bell. He's a legit playmaker. He can go the distance anytime he touches the ball.
No. Yeah, I mean, Mike Vick isn't the same player he used to be, no doubt about that. But he is going up against a pretty bad pass defense. I mean, the Baltimore Ravens have led up the 4th most fantasy points to quarterbacks so far this season. They look very bad on the back end. Mike Vick, he's always been a fantasy beast, if nothing else, when healthy. Outside of last year, obviously, if you give him the New York Jets, it's hard for anybody to be good in that offense. I think their number 1 receiver was Eric Decker at that time. They had J.R. Graham or something out there. But this might actually be the best offense he ever played on. Now, it's not in his prime, so it's a little bit different. But he definitely has options out there. And Antonio Brown, he can get the ball too quick. Le'Veon Bell, he can get the ball too quick. And, I mean, he still has the arm strength. You can bet on that. Now, the accuracy, that's another question. We'll have to see. But he's also going to have a little bit of rushing yardage, too. Nothing like he used to back in the day. I think he had a 1,000-yard season back in 2005 or 2006 or something. But, yeah, for a sleeper quarterback, man, I really like this play against this poor defense. I'm going to stick in the same division and go with Marvin Jones from Cincinnati. He goes up against KC this week. He's put together back-to-back double-digit fantasy performances. In Week 2, he had only 2 catches, but he had 48 yards and a touchdown versus San Diego. And then last week against Baltimore's defense, like I keep saying, a bad defense, he had 5 catches, 94 yards, and a touchdown. You look, KC, they have a good defense, but they've actually given up the most fantasy points to wide receivers so far this season. Now, I know a lot of it had to do with yesterday's game, Green Bay, with Aaron Rodgers throwing 5 touchdowns. Randall Cobb had 3 of those touchdowns, I believe. James Jones did it big in that game. But Marvin Jones, he's looked pretty good over the past 2 weeks, and if KC is going to stop anyone in that passing game, they got to look to stop A.J. Green because he blew up last week. So Marvin Jones is going to see some looks in this game, and I think he could turn out to have a decent game.
One more guy I actually want to give a quick shout out to. Look at Charles Clay against the New York Giants. Mike Vick wasn't my sleeper, by easy decision. I really like this matchup, Clay versus the Giants defense. I like how the Giants have given up the 3rd most fantasy points to tight ends this year. Clay scored the last 2 weeks, and he was 5 for 82 with a touchdown last week. So he's possibly could be an up-and-coming player this year.
Yeah, like I said, I don't like the New York Giants defense too much. Charles Clay, he's looked pretty good over the past 2 weeks. Now, I don't see him as a guy that really is going to put up huge numbers. Like last week, I think that's the max you're going to get out of him maybe, but I think he can do it again this week against the Giants defense. And speaking of the Giants, how about Victor Cruz as well? Tom Coughlin and Victor Cruz both said he'll play this week. Buffalo's letting up a lot of fantasy points to wide receivers right now. I think he should step in as the number 2 wide receiver immediately. If not, it won't be no worse than the number 3 behind Ruben Randall, I wouldn't think. And I think he's going to be involved in this game. But he's still not the same guy that we used to know, not the top 10 wide receiver. Let's move on to deep sleepers here. Jim.
I'm going to go with Cowboys quarterback Brandon Weeden against the Saints. Are they at home for this game,
No,
Dash?
it's in New Orleans.
See, it doesn't really matter because New Orleans isn't even playing as well at home as they used to. They're probably going to have Luke McCown again, so their offense won't be as explosive, although they did well last week. But I like Brandon Weeden. I don't think he's garbage. I would prefer him over Mike Vick as a backup.
Oh, man.
I would. And that's not. I would prefer Weeden over a couple backups, so it's not even just a Vick thing. I think this guy's got an accurate arm. He's a bigger guy. He's a strong guy. He's not afraid to stand in front of the rush. He's never going to be a starting quarterback. I don't think he's that quality. But he's a guy who can come in, win you 3 to 5 games. He knows his offense. He's been down there for a while. He's going to get the ball to his few playmakers that he has, and I think he has a big day because New Orleans defense, I really think that I could probably throw for 200 yards and a touch against these guys.
Well, you're dead wrong about that, but he's only
you're right. I might throw for 303 touches.
Still dead wrong. He's had only 1 TD over the past 2 weeks and failed to find the end zone last week at Atlanta, who we don't think is a very good defense.
Blow up.
But he was 22 for 26 last week. A lot of that check down, like I was saying before, to Dunbar and to Witten. If he's going to do it, it has to be versus New Orleans defense. They let up the 2nd most fantasy points to quarterbacks this season. Brandon Weeden hasn't looked too great so far, but I think he does turn it around this week. 47.
I'm going with Duke Johnson Jr. against the San Diego Chargers this week. Even though Isaiah Crowell was used in the early downs, they're using him strictly in passing situations. He had 6 catches last week versus Oakland.
Yeah, and he only had 32 yards. But San Diego is terrible against running backs this season as well. San Diego's defense does not look good at all this season. And I think as the season goes along, Duke Johnson is going to eventually overtake Isaiah Crowell for playing time.
And Crowell's a guy I actually like, too. I actually had him starting on my fantasy team. He kind of broke my heart in a way. I don't think he's going to be starting again.
We'll have to see what he does this week. Crowell does have a good matchup, just like Johnson this week, obviously. So we'll have to see if Crowell can put it in the end zone a couple times maybe and work his way back up to the starter. I don't know. I think Duke Johnson might be the guy long term.
Duke
Nukem.
I'm going to go with a guy we never talked about on here.
Sorry, that was funny, 47.
I'm going to go with Seth Roberts.
I thought you were going to say Seth Rogen.
No, you're dead wrong. This is Oakland's 3rd/4th wide receiver. He's sort of splitting time with Andre Holmes at the moment. But, like I said, Oakland has a great matchup this week going into Chicago. Chicago's led up the 5th most fantasy points to wide receivers so far. Last week, he had 3 catches for 56 yards and a touchdown at Cleveland. He also caught a TD versus Baltimore in week 2, although it was his only reception. He had 6 targets in week 1, so this guy is involved. He's not going to overtake Amari Cooper or Michael Crabtree by any means, but it looks like he is a little bit better than Andre Holmes out there. And I think the way Derek Carr is playing right now, Seth Roberts should stay involved for now at least. How about some other guys here? Nate Washington at Atlanta. He's had 28 targets through 3 games so far this season.
Nasty Nate.
He only put up 4 catches for 42 yards last week at Tampa Bay, but he still had 9 targets in that game. Ryan Mallett is actually targeting this guy a ton right now. And really, he's the second option behind DeAndre Hopkins at this point. You could look at Cecil Shorts as well. But Nate Washington, he's been pretty consistent in the passing game so far this season. Now, I know Atlanta's let up the 7th fewest fantasy points to wide receiver so far this year, but I don't think Atlanta has that great of a defense, and I think Nate Washington can beat him. And one other guy here. I have no stats for him. He hasn't even played yet this year. Brian Quick from the St. Louis Rams. Remember in the Steelers segment, I was saying Nick Foles has to find a go-to guy in that passing game out there. I think Brian Quick is that guy. I think he is the best receiver on that team. Now, he's been healthy and active here at the beginning of the season. From what I've been reading, they are going to activate him this week. I think he is the best receiver out there. Now, I don't really necessarily think he's a deep sleeper for this week. Maybe if you're in a deep league, go at him and put him on your bench or something. But I think this guy's really going to help Nick Foles long term.
The Rams got to get smarter, and this doesn't have a lot to do with fantasy, but they need to have Quick as their main guy, have Austin running around the middle, and have Britt going deep. And I'm not saying every play or whatever, but that should be those 3 main roles for those guys. They don't seem like they know what the heck they're doing out there on offense.
One other guy, Charles Sims, he's splitting time with Doug Martin right now.
Oh, they just traded for Jared Allen, man.
They've led up the 6th most fantasy points to running back so far this season. So he's going to stay involved in this offense. I don't know if he's going to have a big week or anything. He looks like the guy that's being used in the passing game, though. So that is a plus. Winston looking his way a little bit. I mean, he only caught 2 passes last week, but he had 41 yards and a touchdown. So he should stay involved. He's probably not going to blow up this week or anything. But just keep an eye on Charles Sims and see what he does. That's it, man. Wrap it up.
Well, that's it. That's all our fantasy coverage, says Dash. So I guess I'm just going to end this show. Fans, if you got anything you want to let us know, hit us up on Twitter at bet_the_spread. Hit me up on Twitter at betjimthewin. Check out the Facebook page at facebook.com/betthespread. Keep coming back to YouTube. Clicking subscribe, clicking thumbs up. Good luck on your fantasy team. If you're playing against me, you're probably going to lose.